Hey everyone, welcome. It is 6:06 p.m. Central Time, Wednesday, February 28th. This is session 5 of Intro to Coding Live. We've just got one concept to cover this evening, which is going to be scope. And we've already talked about this, but we'll go over it formally now. And so in JavaScript, scope refers to where variables and functions are accessible in your code. Global scope is any variable declared outside of a function is going to be in global scope. You can access these variables anywhere in the program, and then local scope is anything defined inside of a function is only accessible to that function, and any functions or blocks of code inside it. And we look at the example here. So we've got just let name equal Tom is accessible anywhere in your code, console.log name. The name variable is accessible within the say hello function because it's within the global scope. So we can still get there. And then if we do something like my age and we return age, we can return it out of the function. But if we try and access it out of the function, it will yell at us. And then there's also hoisting. We talked about this as well, which is where JavaScript basically behind the scenes crams everything up to the top of its scope before code is executed. And so let's just go ahead and take a look at that and the replit here real quick. So again, we kind of talked about this and we use the example of a function. So we'll say let name equal Charles. And if I do console.log name, again here, we're up there at the global scope. If I do function say name, and notice I'm not passing anything in as a parameter here. I'm just gonna console.log the name here. And then if I do say name, we'll do console.log name and then no, it's giving me the crossed out there. Oops, didn't add my friends. All right, so access, so global scope, I can access it inside my function. However, now if I do something like this and say let local name equal Todd, only available inside of say name. Right, and so if I console.log local name, so there it is. So I'm hitting it at the global scope. I'm getting my local name inside of my function locally, and then global scope, but also inside of my function. And then if I come down here and back out into my my global scope or my scope outside of my say name method, and I do local name. Right, first off, my this should be yelling at me because I'm outside of the scope. There's not sure what name is. Oh, that's because I called this name. First name. That way it'll stop yelling at me. And I run this. So local name is not defined. Normally this should be yelling at me down here. I don't know why replit isn't, but this scope out here does not see anything local to the inside of function. We also talked about this inside of a for loop, so or an if statement. So if I say let, or I say for, let I equal 0, I less than 10, I plus plus, and I say console.log I right? There's that, but same thing. Console.log right? I is not defined because I'm outside of the scope of the for loop. This let I only exists inside of the for loop. All right, any questions on that? No, okay, so next we'll look at alphabet code. All right, and so just to refresh here, we had gone over the prep work, given everyone about 25 minutes to work on it. Did anyone solve it yesterday or outside of class? No one? Okay, Michaela, you did. All right. How did you, what type of data type did you use to solve it?
I used a string.
Okay. And that's probably how I would try and solve it as well. There's a couple of different ways to do it. So first off, you could use an object, right? So we could say let alphabet equal, we'll say A1, B2. Oops. Um, quotes here, B2, so on and so forth through the entire alphabet. And then you could do something like return alphabet and then letter, I believe should work. And we won't get anything for this, but it should work for the first two, right? And we get our true there. So we hit it that way. This, however, would be very tedious to type all of this stuff out. The next way that you could do it would be to do an array. Oops. All right, we could say let alphabet equal A, B, C, and so on through the entire alphabet again. And this time, instead of let's just do this. Right, instead of accessing it with a key, we could use a built-in that would actually return the index position of it. So we could look at how do I find the index position of an element in JavaScript, right? So index of is the way to go. So array.prototype index of, and let's look down here, the search element, and then it would return a value of the first index of the search element in the array, -1 if not found. So if I were to do something like this, so I could say alphabet dot index of, and we'll say letter. And if we run this, right, so we get false, false, but the reason being, take this out of the return, throw this into the console, right? We get 0 and 1, and that is because indexes, humans start counting at 1, computers start counting at 0, right? So we would need to adjust this a little bit, and we would have to add 1 to it, right? Because A is going to be 0, Z is going to be 25, and we need it to match up with basically like how a human would count it. And so that would be 1 and 2. So if I take this back out of the console.log and throw it into the return, There's my true. And what's good for this instance with an array would also work for a string. And the reason being is because strings do have index positions as well. So we could do the same thing with a string. We could say let alphabet equal that. And so we could do console.log. We could say alphabet dot index of. And again, the same thing if we do letter in here. Right, there's our 0 and 1 again. Uncomment this one. Should see 0, 1, and 25. 0, 1, and 25. If I add 1 to it. See what happened there. 0, 1, 25. Hang on, I think my code got disconnected again. There we go, 1, 2, and 26. And so now I can take this out of the console.log and just return something like this. And there's my true, and true. All right, so multiple ways to do this. This one requires the least amount of typing. So I like this one. And using the object and having to do key value pairs and comma separated. This would be the most amount of typing. So while this one would work, I think I would prefer to do it this way just because I could do it in 2 lines of code with minimal amount of impact. So any questions on how this one got solved? Any of these 3 ways? All right, let's go ahead and pick the next one. And so we just finished alphabet code. So let's go ahead and we're going to skip rectangle 1, average velocity, gravity, rectangle 2. These are all, I mean, basically just like adding and returning a value. Let's take a look at a legal word. Will be the next one that we work on. So we'll go ahead and click it, fork it, get our copy here. And let's go ahead and take a look at the README. So write a function that takes in a sentence and an illegal word. It returns a Boolean indicating whether or not the sentence contains the illegal word. Capitalization should not matter. All right. So just, well, let's grab this right here. All right, so I'm getting 2 params. One is going to be a string has a sentence in it. 2 will be a word to search the sentence for. All right, return will be a Boolean. Right, so true if the word is found inside the sentence. All right, and few examples, say see below. Now, with this, and if I were to, so here's a little bit of insight. If you go in to an interview and you sit down for like an entry-level technical interview, and I gave you this challenge, does anyone know the easiest way off the top of their head to solve this?
Just use a string built-in method.
Yep, there's a string built-in method. Uh, I'm trying to remember it in JavaScript. It's either include or dot includes,
Yeah, that includes.
and that will give you an answer. Uh, so let's see here, dot includes. In Ruby, it's include, and JavaScript, it's includes. Right, so I can say the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. I can say sentence dot includes word, and this will return true or false. Right, and so if I was sitting down with you for an interview and I said, how do you solve this? And we've got 45 minutes for an interview, you're going and you say, well, I would just use dot include. Anyone want to take a stab at what my next thing would be?
Hmm. How can you find it without using a built-in function?
Yep, and that's what we're gonna do. And then if you solved that one, then I would probably say, how do we solve it with recursion? Right, and so there's a lot of times when, and this is kind of a heads up for like basic technical interviews, uh, and even not at the junior level, at the senior and above level, I do senior and principal level interviews at my company, and when you sit down to our technical interview, it's 90 minutes long. You have two people in the interview with you, and the problem that we lay out in front of you on the surface is fairly straightforward. However, we give you really bad data to work with, and it quickly becomes apparent that there's a lot more to it than what you think there is. So if you ever sit down for an interview and the the question seems way easier than what it should be, um, there's kind of like two possible outcomes. One, you studied the exact right thing and you're gonna nail the interview, or two, there's a lot more underneath the initial question that's coming your way. And so with something like this, if you came in and like this was the problem and I said, hey, let's figure this out, you could say, yep, let's do it as dot includes, and then I would say, okay, that's correct. Can we solve this without using dot includes? Right. And then if you solve it that way, then I'd say, okay. And because we know that we need to look at multiple words in here, like as part of our pseudocode, we're going to write a loop. I'm going to say, can you solve this without dot includes? And can you solve this without a for loop? Right. And so then the next step would be having to use some sort of recursion to solve a problem like this. And so with that, I'm not going to force anyone to solve this with recursion yet, because we don't really cover that until next week, and we won't go too far into recursion. It's just more of a quick primer to let you know that it exists as a concept. But I do want you as teams to solve this without using dot includes. All right, so I think we're good with this. Excuse me. I'm gonna open up the breakout rooms. We're going to shoot for, so we've got 11 people, so shoot for teams of 3 and 4 here. And then does anyone have any questions for me before I put everyone out to the breakout room? And also before I put everyone out to the breakout room, let me make sure that everyone has the ability to share their screen. 1 second here. Stop. Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. So here we go. I'm going to drop that in the chat. I will also drop it in intro to coding in Slack. And now I will stop my share. Enable screen sharing for everyone. Pause the recording. All right, everyone, welcome back from the illegal word challenge. So my one additional ask was that you don't use .includes to solve this problem, because that just makes it pretty easy. So what we needed to do to solve this is basically we need to take our sentence, split it into, split the words into an array, and then loop through that array and check for the illegal word. We also do need to adjust for correct capitalization. And so we can definitely use a built-in method to knock that out. All right, so we could do something like this. So let's take a look at sentence and word. Make sure that we're getting what we expect. Yep, so hello there, but I didn't say fudge, but I didn't say fudge, 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 and then fudge with a capital F. And so what we can do with this is basically send both of these to uppercase or both of these to lowercase, as long as we're sending them in the same direction, right? So we can say to lowercase and to lowercase. Yeah, oh fudge, right? And so now we've basically solved for the issue of capitalization, because it doesn't matter what's coming in. We're going to send everything to lowercase so that we know we're going to see the same thing here. And probably what I would do to start with, just so I don't forget about this, is I'm going to take both of these and we're going to say sentence equals that, and then we'll also say word equals word. And what I'm doing is I'm reassigning these values in place. So now if I look at sentence, right, everything is to lowercase, right? So I just technically I could give these different variable names or whatever, but I don't need these for anything else. So I'm just going to reassign them with the values that we're looking for. All right, and now we can start the comparison. So we can say something like let array equal sentence dot split. And we're going to split it on our, well, we'll just say array of sentence. Or even better, we'll just call it split sentence. And now I can do split sentence. And let's take a look at this. Right, and now I have each word in its own array, right? So if I were to do, we'll say split sentence 0, and we say if it's triple equal to word, what I would expect to see in each of these is I should now be console.logging a false value for each of them. Right, so false, 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 this true, is coming from this down here. And the reason we're seeing this here is because we've got this bang operator, and so it's automatically resolving this thing into true or false without having any comparison in there. And so with that, this looks like what I want to do. But now I've hard coded in an index of the 0, so just the first word for each of these. So now I need to figure out, how do I compare it against each of these, right? And so what I want to do is we'll get rid of this console.log for right now. Oops. And let's go ahead and start our for loop. So we'll say for let I equal 0, I less than split sentence dot length, and then we'll do I plus plus, right? And if we console.log split sentence bracket I, what I would hope to see is each of my words in the sentence put out there individually. Now I can compare these against the word itself, right? And so now I would expect to see some fault, like the first one's going to be all false, 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 and then true, false, 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 and then true, right? Because we adjusted for this. So this is basically what we're looking for here. And what I want to do is I will say, if actually I'm going to take it out of the console.log. I'm just going to say, if this return true, and I'm not going to write an else statement here. And because I don't want a else false right here, because that means after I check the first word, I'm going to return, and as soon as I return, I exit my function and I don't ever do anything else with it, right? So basically what I want to do is, if the word matches, I want to return true, but if it doesn't match, I just want to continue to the next word in the sentence, right? And I'll check it again, and that way, if I make it all the way through my for loop without ever hitting a true, now I can return false. And so that way, if none of the words were ever matched, then with my illegal word, then at the end of my loop, I exit my loop, and then I just return false. Right? And so now if I do this, right, I get true, 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 which is basically what I'm looking for out of this. And this one returns false because it's not there, but we put the bang operator and it returns true, and they've got it labeled as a test. I know it's a little confusing. And then this one, the word is in there, and then in this one, the word isn't. So this would be a working, excuse me, working solution without using the dot includes. Now, with that, right, like I could also do something like this, just return sentence dot includes word, right? And notice how when I put a return up here, all of this gets kind of faded out. And if I hold my mouse over it, it says unreachable code detected. Anything after a return is unreachable code, because return is the last thing your function will ever do. So as soon as it hits its first return, nothing after that is usable code. It's all unreachable. We'll never get here. And so this would also solve it right here, just in a single line. Like, we don't need all of this. This is basically what this built-in method, if we dug into the guts of JavaScript, we would find something that looks like this in there. Probably not written exactly this way, but this is what dot includes does to find if basically a substring is found inside of the string. And so we'll comment this out, and that works for everything. The reason this return doesn't prevent this return is because this one is conditional. right? And so the same thing, like if I commented this out, I don't think the replet does anything with this, but this would always return true on the first loop through. So technically this would become unreachable code as well. But because this one is optional, so it may or may not hit this true, this code is technically still reachable. All right, any questions on how I solved this one? Going once, going twice. All right, it is 7:05. Let's go ahead and take a we'll just take a quick 5-minute break here. I'll give you the change. So I'm going to start back up at a 7:11, so in 6 minutes from now. All right, everyone, 7:13 p.m. Welcome back from the break. We're going to hit our next challenge, which is going to be caffeine control. And so we're going to click on it, open it up. We're going to fork and run. We're going to fork the replet. We're going to get our own copy of it. Let's take a look at the README here. Just going to pull this over. That right there. This. All right, so every weekday you drink caffeine to get ready for the morning. Monday, which is an M, you need 800 milligrams to wake up for the weekend. On Tuesday, you only need 600 milligrams. On Wednesday and Thursday, you only need 400 milligrams, but on Fridays, you drink 900 milligrams because you know you'll be staying up late and going out with friends. You prefer buying small energy drinks that contain 150 milligrams of caffeine each. Write a method that takes in the day as a string and returns the minimum amount of caffeine drinks you'll need to buy. Right, so we're not looking for fractions. It's got to be a whole number, and it's the minimum. So on a day where there's 400 and we buy them in 150 milligram units, that means that we would need to buy 3 cans. So we'll go over a little bit, but we want that whole integer. All right, so let's take a look here. We're getting 1 param, which is a string that represents the day of the week. Right, and we're going to return a number, integer, that represents the number of 150 milligram cans of energy drink we need feed our addiction. All right, example, we'll say see below. Okay, so this one, there's a couple of different ways to solve this, all right? And what I would like to see you do as a group, and you can solve, and I won't say what I would like to see you do. I'm going to introduce something here. So far, we've talked about if statements and ternary operators as far as control flow, right? And we know up here, we're going to be dealing with data types and we're going to be dealing with control flow. And we also have in JavaScript, oops, sorry, it's not a case statement. In JavaScript, it's a switch statement. We have switch statements, all right? And the switch statement evaluates an expression, matching the expression's value against a series of case clauses and executes statements after the first case clause with a matching value. Until a break statement is encountered, the default clause of a switch statement will be jumped if no case matches the value. All right, so with this, so we have something, we call this expression, but we're just giving it the value papaya, right? And so we write a switch statement, which takes a look at whatever we feed it, all right? And so in our case, we'd be feeding it like M, W, T, F, so on and so forth. And then it looks for a matching case. And with that case, it will then, so when you match your case, it will then enter your case statement, just like if your true statement were to resolve to true, you would go inside of your if statement. Same way with a case statement. If we match our case, we enter the case statement and we execute the code inside. If not, we skip over it. Now, we have to be careful with a case statement. We need to use the word break in here. If we do not use the word break, what happens in a case statement is your case will fall through, right? So if, let's say if I didn't have break right here and this was oranges, it would say, it would hit oranges, execute the code in here, and then continue to execute the additional lines of code. Right, so the first time it hits, if there's no break statement, you'll keep going. Now, with that, if you put like instead, if this wasn't a console.log and it was a return, it would stop it because the last thing your function ever does is a return. So that would be a way around it. But if you're not returning out of your case statement, you need that break. Otherwise, it'll keep going and going and going. All right. And so you can solve this with a if statement. You could solve this with a switch statement. I'll leave it up to you and your group how you want to solve it. I'm going to drop this link in with the pseudocode here. Or I'll just put it underneath it right there. So that's to the switch statement. But with this, as always, I want to access my param to make sure I know what getting. And so basically what I need to do is, again, there's another way that you could do this as well. So 3 ways to solve. And because we're using control flow, right, we were going to use a switch statement, a if, else if, else statement. Yeah, sorry, I've been working in a different language all day today. Where are my conditional statements? Functions, control flow, there we go. Okay, it is else if in JavaScript. Part of my brain was saying if else, so it's else if, else. You could technically also solve this with an object. Right, so we could do something where the key is Tuesday, and that is going to be 3 cans, right? And so on and so forth. But because we're trying to practice our control flow, don't use this one for this change. All right. And so use a switch statement, use a chained if else statement to get your solution here. And then let's see, we got the return, we got all that. All right, so we should be good to go on this. Are there any questions on any of this before I turn everyone loose into the breakout rooms? So it's yelling at me. So let me just break this into 2. Here's the first part. Second part. And there's the whole thing there. So pause recording. All right, everyone, welcome back from the caffeine control flow challenge. We're going to go ahead and go over some solutions here. So the first way we'll tackle this is with a switch statement. All right, and So with this, we need what we want to evaluate. In this case for us, it's going to be a string character, a day coming in. And then we want to match our case to that, right? So I need a switch and a case. So let's go ahead and start there. All right, so actually, I'm sorry. So first off, I'm going to console.log day just to make sure I'm seeing what I expect. All right, and I get an M and an R. That looks good to me. So I can pop this out of the console.log and I can put switch day. And so I've got switch, and then I need my curly braces, and then each of my case statements are going to be basically a string here that I'm trying to match up to, and then a colon, and then I enter my case state or my specific case statement inside of the switch. So got that. And then so I can say case, and we'll just start with M here. And now I see with one of the groups that solved it, it looked like they were console.logging it to there, and they were doing the math and dividing it by 150 in each of the cases. We could definitely do that. So we could do something like return. Let's see here, for a Monday, I believe we need 600, 800 for a Monday because we're tired, divided by 150. Right, and so for right now, I'm just going to build out my the two cases that I know that I have, which are a Monday, and then R should be for Thursday. Right, and then we'll do return 400 divided by 150, and we don't need the break because we're returning right now. So I'll just see what this looks like. Can I hit these cases here? And while I test that, I'm just going to comment out my quality comparison for right now, and I want to see what I'm actually getting with it. Right, so there's my 5 cans, 5.33. So I know it. So I'm hitting my cases correctly. So I know I'm getting in there. I know that I'm going to need to round up here. Now, instead of dividing by 150 for each of these, what I could also do is I could say, we could say let caffeine, am I spelling that right? I'm probably not spelling it right. Caffeine. And then instead of returning here, we could do something that says caffeine equals 800. Right, and now I get rid of this return and I can put a break statement in here, and now my break's no longer unreachable. And then down here, I could return caffeine divided by 150. Right, and so now it's here too. We'll do caffeine equals 400. Break. And does anyone want to take a guess at why this might be a better way to do it than to do the math in line and with each of these? So what if the company stops selling 150 milligram cans and they only start selling 175 milligram cans? If I then need to update my function for the new amount that I'm dividing by, if I have it for each day of the week, I have to come in and replace 150 with 175 5 times, versus now I could just do it the one time. And past that, if this case statement was larger, or if it was more spread out, so maybe I don't see all of it in the exact same spot, then I could miss updating one of these. Maybe I leave one at 150 and the rest of them get changed to 175. And now I've introduced a bug into my code, right? So whenever we can get away with typing something once, that's what we want to do. And so let's go ahead and take a look at throwing the rest of our case statements in here. So I've got Tuesday. And for that, I need 600, and then Wednesday and Thursday are the same. So I can do Tuesday, we can do caffeine is equal to 600. And now with this, and again, we'll do the break. We can also do something like this, and then I'll just double check this over here, right? And we can create a fall through statement here. And so what this is doing inside of a switch statement is it should be allowing me to go through, yeah, so breaking and falling through, right? So no break here. And so what I'm doing by not putting anything in there, but also not putting the break, is if I change this, well, we'll just leave it the same, right? So if I run this now, right, I get oh, let's change this back to 150. Right, so there's my second one, there's my 2.66. And if I change this to a W, right, I get 2.66 still. So what's happening is, because I don't have a break in here, I'm hitting a W, which is, so Wednesday's 400, Thursday's 400. I don't need to put anything in here, and this is basically just saying, if it's a W or if it's an R, give me 400. That. And then for lastly, for Friday, we'll do case F. I'll do caffeine equals 900. And then with a case statement, the linting isn't going to catch it here, but like a lot of times it's going to yell at you if you don't have that default statement, right? So sorry, we're out of blank. And technically, like, I could put one of the days to the default, but what would make more sense to me would be something like this. So if we did default and then we return, that is not a valid weekday. All right. And let's see here. Why am I getting yelled at? Default. Oh, sorry, that is probably my linter yelling, or declaration statement expected. Jump, break. And that's why it's mad at me, is because I put it outside of my switch statement. There we go. Now it's happy again. All right. So now what would happen is if I put anything in there besides one of the valid days of the week, right, that is not a valid weekday. And so, and that would go if I put like a number in there, if I put an extended string, anything that isn't one of my 5 declared cases would return a default message, which is kind of more like a warning or error message there. All right. And so now I need to, no. Right, so math.floor, we know that that would bring it down, math.round. We don't want to do that, but math.seal looks pretty good to me. Ooh, let's get the MDN. Right, and so the math.seal static method always rounds up and returns the smallest integer greater than or equal to a given number. So 0.95 is 1, 4 is 4, 7.004 is 8, and a negative number would round it up to the next highest whole negative number, right? So that means that I could take something like this and say math.seal, right? 6 and 3, that's looking pretty good to me. If I were to do the same thing here for a Friday, I would also expect to see 6. And I do. And then same thing, if I put a non-valid day in here, like Saturday or Sunday. Let's go ahead and delete this, this. Delete this. Oops. Doop, 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 doop. And then this should be equal this. Right, and there's all my truths. Okay, so this is how I would solve this with a switch statement. And if I were to do this with an if statement, it would just be again, it would be in chained else if. So we could do, let's not put that there. We're gonna leave caffeine there. We'll comment this out for right now. And we'll say if day equals M, else if day equals T, oops, I'm assigning here. Sorry, I'm getting sloppy. Need to should be triple equals, triple equals, triple equals, triple equals, triple equals, and then this would be 900. And then else. That. Right, and then this is down here still, so we should still get true for everything, right? So this is another way, so, and again, we have the fall through statement here with the W and the R. Here, we're just saying if day is strictly equal to W or day is strictly equal to R, then caffeine is equal to 400, so that's the representation of that in the if statement. But both of these do the exact same thing. They're just different ways of doing it. And usually when you see like this many statements chained together, I think right about here where we got 1, 2, 3, 4, kind of like 5, like that's there is no hard limit, but I think stylistically, once you start getting more than 5 in an if statement, then maybe start to look at like using a switch statement, building out the different cases. Any questions on either of these solutions here? Okay, so we're going to pick out our next challenge here, which is, let's see here, I'm trying to remember if this one's worth looking at. What's your grade? No, this one's not. We'll skip that one. So the next one we're gonna do is Fizz Buzz. So it's 8:05 right now. Let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break. We're gonna get started back up at 8:10 here. And then we'll go over Fizz Buzz and I'll break you out into the rooms and probably give everyone about a half hour, 35 minutes to work on this one. This one's a little bit trickier. And then we should be able to go over the solution and then we'll be done with class for the year. So I'll see everyone back in here at 8:10. All right, everyone, welcome back. It is 8:10 p.m. Central Time. We're going to jump into our next challenge, which is going to be FizzBuzz. So click the link, fork and run, fork the REPL. And let's take a look at the README. So the FizzBuzz test is an interview question designed to help filter out 99.5% of programming job candidates. That's a bold claim. The text of the programming assignment is follow something similar to this. Write a program that prints an object with a number of keys. The key is the number and the value is either the number, fizz, buzz, or FizzBuzz. But for multiples of 3, assign the key's value to equal to fizz instead of the number, and for multiples of 5, assign the key's value to equal to buzz. For numbers which are multiples of both 3 and 5, assign the key's values to equal FizzBuzz. Otherwise, assign the key's value to equal the number. All right, so here's an example here. If we were to run FizzBuzz 100 through our program, we get an object and we've got the keys here are all numbers. All right, and don't worry about the color, and remember that within an object, everything gets turned into a string behind the scenes by JavaScript. So when you print it out in the console, they'll actually look like this, and that's not a big deal. It's not part of the challenge or anything. You don't control that, JavaScript does. Right, so key of 1, value of 1, key of 2, value of 2, key of 3, which is a multiple of 3. So the value is fizz. 4 is 4, 5, and all multiples of 5 are buzz. Right, so 6 is a multiple of 3, fizz, so on and so forth up there. And once we hit 15, that's the first time something's a multiple of both 5 and 3. So we get FizzBuzz, right? And so on and so forth, all the way up through 100. And with this specific program, where they're asking that it basically be added into an object, right? So let's go ahead and take a look at this here real quick. So we want to do console.log FizzBuzz 100, right? So that's going to be what we want to output. So we're going to get one parameter, which is an integer. A return is going to be an object that contains the key value pairs of numbers, fizzes, buzzes, and FizzBuzzes. All right, so example, we'll say see below, and I will grab just a chunk of this here. So that we're getting, we'll just go to 20. All right, so first things first, we want to access our param and console.log. Okay, after that, so we know we need an object. There's a hint. All right. So there is the write-up for the pseudocode. Let me go ahead and I'm going to grab this. Dump it over here. Also throw it in here. Oops. That's better. All right. Go ahead and pause the recording. All right, everyone, welcome back from the FizzBuzz Challenge. We're going to go ahead and go over the solution. It's about 8:50 p.m. Central Time. We should be able to knock this out, and then we'll go about our way here. All right, so first things first, let's take a look and make sure that we're getting the num that we're expecting. All right, so there's my 100. There's undefined because I'm not returning anything yet. And I also know that I need an object that I can add key value pairs to, right? So I can declare my object right there. And then I'll also return my object because I know that's what I'm going to, sorry, I won't call this object. We'll call this, we'll call it FizzBuzz object. That's a better name. Better name if I can type. There we go. So we'll go ahead and run this again. All right, so there's my count and there's my empty object. So first things first, let's take a look. How do I add a new key value pair to an object JavaScript? All right, using property assessors, MDN. No, that's the object. Working with objects. That instruction, new one. So you can always add a property to a previously defined object. For example, this statement, car.1, color equals black, right? And so up here, they're creating a new object. This is instantiating a new object class through, we're starting to get into some object-oriented programming. But the whole thing here is that we can basically reference our object, give it a key, and then assign a value to it. So if we do something like this, so if I say FizzBuzz object, and we'll just give it a key of example, and then assign a value of hello, and then we're still going to return our object down here. There's our object with our key value pair that we just added into it. So for right now, I'll get rid of this. And I know that I'm going to need to generate all of these values. For right now, I'm just going to drop this down to 10. And let's go ahead and write a for loop. And we'll say for let I equal 1, because we don't need a 0 here. We're going to start counting at 1, and we'll say, well, I is less than or equal to num, so that we get up to our last value. And then I plus plus. And let's go ahead and console.log, or sorry, we're not going to console.log anything. We're going to do FizzBuzz object, and then we'll give it a key of I, and we'll also give it a value of I. And let's see what we get when we do that. And comment that out for right now. Right, and so there's a key of 1, a value of 1, a key of 2, a value of 2. All right, so Now, and if I were to change this to 100, it would just keep going, right? But we know we're starting at 1, we're ending at 100, so that's looking good to me. So now we need to start making decisions. So first decision would be every time we hit a multiple of 3, we need to basically, instead of giving it the value, we need to, or sorry, give it the count, we need to give it the string fizz. And so we could now start to do some conditional logic. So we could say if I is let's see here, remainder of modulo 3 is triple equal to 0, then we'll do the same thing, but we'll, instead of I, we'll give it fizz. Asking for uppercase. And so now every time that I is divided by 3, does not have a remainder, so that it's evenly divisible by 3, we'll get fizz instead of the count. Nope, I did something wrong here. It's because I'm stamping it with fizz and then I'm immediately stamping it with I over the top of it. So let's do that. And let's try that again. There we go. So this is looking pretty good to me. So there's my fizz. And now I could do else if I modulo 5 triple equals 0, then we can say buzz there, else, open that back up, enter. Right, so now fizz, buzz, fizz, fizz, buzz, right? Now we run into an issue though, right? So this should be buzz, right? So 15 technically should be fizz buzz, but we're seeing it as fizz, which means that the first time we hit a correct branch of our if statement, we're going to do that every time. So if I did another else if down here with fizz buzz, we would never actually hit fizz buzz. We're just going to hit fizz every single time. So what I need to do is actually change this a little bit. And so we're going to do, we'll do this. So we'll say else if I modulo, whoops, I modulo 3 triple equals 0. And then we'll take this down here. And now there's a couple of different ways that I could do this. So I could say I modulo or remainder 5 triple equals 0 and 3. Then instead of giving it a fizz, we can give it a fizz buzz. Right, so now I've got fizz buzz, fizz buzz, fizz, and then fizz buzz. So this is a correct answer. Does anyone have a something that I could do to clean this up a little bit? Do I need that and statement? So if something is evenly divisible by 5 and evenly divisible by 3, what else is it evenly divisible by? All right, so we can do a little math here, and we can say evenly divisible by 15. Right, and then we'll still get our fizz buzz in the right spot. We're counting by 15s here. All right, and this is the solution. All right, so any questions on how I solved this one? Okay, so it is 8:59, so we're right up against the end of class here. So I'm going to turn off the recording. This is the end of class.